Hey guys, I want to give a quick shout out to the new sponsor, Dueling Guard. They have great mats, deck boxes, sleeves, everything you can think of for TCG apparel. Check them out in the description box down below and use code SAKO for 5% off. Hey guys, Lucas Sacco here. Today I'm doing a hand trap tier list video, and joining me today I actually have
Logan Johnson.
Awesome. So we're just gonna get right into the video. If you guys didn't know, by the way, Logan Johnson actually started his own YouTube. You can check it out in the description box down below. Please go subscribe to him. He's honestly like one of the best players in the game. Really good information overall. But getting into the video, let's start with Nibiru. How are you feeling about Nibiru this format?
I think Nib has taken a step down from the previous formats because expectation is Yubel will be the tier 1 deck, the meta deck, the deck to beat. I think Nib is not as good against that deck as it was against Snake Eye. And I think Snake Eye has actually hit harder than it was like previously thought to be. So I think Nib is still going to be like top of A tier is where I would put it.
I think I agree. It's definitely not as good into the Yubel deck, but against all the other rogue decks, it seems to be very powerful. Now we have a little bit of a weird one. What do you think about DD Crow?
So where I'm at with DD Crow is I was kind of a bigger fan of DD Crow going into like a more rogue meta, but I think overall the card is just worse than a Bestial would be. Obviously, if you play against only rogue, the card will be better because you can hit like spawn trap cards, you can hit the Memmentolan guy, which is an earth monster. But I think overall into like a meta that is Yubel and Snake Eye, I think the card is just worse than a Bestial. Probably going in B tier or low A.
I think a B tier fits it really well. It does have some nice interactions against Tempai as well, but I mean, to be honest, any sort of interaction against Tempai is good once they've entered the battle phase. I got 2 interactions on that deck is cooked, so I'd probably put it in B tier as well. Now we have like the standard one, Ash Blossom. I'd put this straight up in S tier.
Yeah, this card's S tier for sure. It's a blowout against all the rogue decks. Like one Ash can absolutely destroy almost any rogue deck.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And then we have Shifter. Shifter is probably S tier as well. The only problem with Shifter is like what decks are able to play Shifter. And if your deck can play Shifter, you should play Shifter. The card is absolutely broken.
Agree. That card should have a tier of its own.
Absolutely. So now we have kind of a handshake that goes together. We have Gamma and Delta. Gamma is probably the best activatable hand trap in the game besides Shifter. The only problem with Gamma is that it has the driver tax. So if you have to play like driver in your deck, you're playing a 1-to-1 brick ratio. So you end up usually playing Delta in combination with Gamma in order to like help minimize the like bad card ratio in it. So like, what do you think overall about those 2 cards?
So I don't think Delta is a main deckable card. The card is dead going first, and going second, the card is usually it's just worse than Ash Blossom the majority of the time. And honestly, it's worse than Ogre the majority of the time because Ogre you can draw on like your own turn. So a card not being main deckable already is going to fall in the category of like B or C. In terms of side decking, with the driver tax, like we said, and then you're also going to be playing Gamma, which obviously Gamma is like an S tier god card. I think it's kind of hard to rank them. In terms of like actual like how many slots you have in your side, they probably fall like Delta probably falls like C tier and Gamma falls into the B tier. And then when you like average them out, they probably like the whole package comes out to like a low B tier package in my opinion, or high C tier package. How do you feel about that?
I think that makes perfect sense to me. The cards are overall broken, but I mean they definitely have their downsides. Moving on, we have Vados. This is a card that has not really seen any like playability so far, but the card does counter all field spell decks. And right now you have Tempai, you have Runic, you have the Yubel deck all playing like field spells being very valuable to them. And so I could see this card maybe seeing some sort of play, but I'm not too sure. What are your thoughts?
So when you read the card, like take it for face value, the card seems very powerful because obviously the meta, like we said, is including a lot of field spells. But when you sit down and actually play the games and have this card in your deck, it proves to just be worse than all the other hand traps in the game. Like, to be honest, like honestly, you'd rather Ash like a Throne. You'd rather, you know, have an Ogre for Pain. Like, I don't think this card really, it doesn't really pair that well. And by itself, it's not doing a whole lot. Especially as well too, is if they're just able to set up a Phantom. Like any hand trap is just going to be even weaker into that. So I think this card is like back in the binder, low C tier. I don't think it's the meta for this card. Every deck is able to put up negates like Arvada and Phantom too early, and the impact of this card by itself is not high enough.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Another weird one here, we have Typhoon. This is a card that I know that you liked a little bit last format. I think it's more of because it's like a cool card more than anything. I don't think this card's too good. I think at most it's like a C tier, but it probably just goes back into our binder.
Yeah, I think this is definitely back in the binder for now. I think this card has a really high upside potential against the Yubel deck, being able to obviously hit their continuous spells. They play so many, but now, of course, opening the Spirit Gates is limited. There's less opportunity to actually use this card. I think in a format where opening wasn't hit, I think this card could come into like top of C tier, but right now this card's back in your binder. I would not play this card.
Totally agree. Now we have all the bestial monsters. I put them in here individually just because they all kind of serve their own purpose. Magnemite, I'm instantly putting in S tier. This card
Absolutely.
should probably be banned. Yeah, just shouldn't be a playable card.
This card's broken. I had this card banned on my ban list prediction. I think one day this card will be getting banned.
Yeah. Next up is Drworm. A Drworm is definitely a good card. Going into the next format, I think this card has potential to be even like an A tier card, maybe playing 2 to 3 of it in your main deck, just because of how much Yubel is in the format. And the removal of Drworm is really powerful. It's really hard for Yubel to like remove bodies that summon themselves. So like Nibiru, Drworm, Magnemite, those kind of hand traps that summon themselves. It's kind of hard for Yubel to remove them unless they go for their SP like super early. And if they go for their SP, that means that they're not using Rage to make SP, which is a big difference in their end board. So I'd probably put Drworm in an A tier.
I do agree with putting Drworm in A tier. I do think there's a potential drop off in Bestials a little bit. With the inclusion of Caesar like really in the meta, every end board is going to have Caesar. Top decking a Bestial for your turn isn't quite as good as it was before. And if they're able to, you know, force out your Bestial early by threatening a Caesar, it's also a little bit scary. In the past, like a lot of the Snake Eye decks were not playing Caesar, so you never had that risk. But overall, Drworm is such a powerful card that I think even in a meta where Caesar is so relevant, this card is still going to be low A tier card.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And the last bishop we have is Baldrake. Baldrake, I think, serves like a really different purpose. It's obviously a hand trap that pairs best with another hand trap that summons itself, like Nibiru, another bestial monster, Phantasme, something like that. However, Baldrake also is just very powerful when you're going first. So, in a little bit different than Magnemite and Drworm, those cards are much better when you're going second. Baldrake, I think, is better when you're going first. Something to like slowly minimize how they're like breaking your board, but also like summoning the card and then making sure you get the effect because you already have an established boards with light and darks. It's really powerful.
Yes, I agree with that. I also think that Baldrake is the better Bestial. If you were to have one against Tempai, you would rather have Baldrake than you would Drworm. Especially with the field spell getting limited, I think it's a little bit better against Tempai than it was before. But Baldrake is a card where if you build your deck around Baldrake, this card could be potentially S tier or high A tier. But if you're playing a simple package of like Drworm, Magnemite, 3 Nibiru, I think it's probably like top of B tier, low A tier.
Yeah, I'm thinking top of B would probably be the better spot for it. It could change depending on the format and how many Bestials actually end up seeing play. But I think that Baldrake is a very good card that people are underestimating.
Absolutely.
We got Dominus Purge as the next card here. This card, I think, is a little bit overrated. I've seen a lot of players talking about this. It's only usable in decks that are kind of bad right now, like Voiceless Voice. But I don't see this card seeing much play in like the near future.
I agree with that. I actually I borderline think this card is not good, even in the decks that can play it. I think this card's only really powerful when you compare it with like an Imperm. And outside of that, I think this card is just not impactful enough. Maybe there's a meta where this card's negation can be a really good choke point in the decks where it's viable in, but right now this is back in your binder.
Okay, I think I agree with that too. Now we have Bell. Bell is good. It stops bestial monsters when you're going first. However, if you're using Bell on a bestial monster, you're just kind of like losing the trade there because they're keeping their bestial monster and you lost a card in hand. Then it's also going to force you to end on Caesar just so you can counter their bestial monster. So like you're having to warp your board now to even like play the game. Not to mention, Bell doesn't even have that much coverage going into the next format. The main purpose of Bell is going to be to hit runic decks as well as hitting like Labyrinth as a deck. I think this card is probably like a low C, but what are your thoughts?
I agree with that too. I've never really been a huge fan of Bell. I know before the ban list, you like towards the end, you were kind of starting to put Bell in your side deck and testing it a little bit. I don't know how much you liked it last format, but I haven't been a fan of this card for a very long time.
Yeah, the card seemed more like just overkill for the matches that you already have coverage in, so I didn't think it was worth playing, but I thought it was good to go ahead and give it the option to test it out. Cherries. This card I have a hatred for. I think this card is absolutely terrible. It is one of the only hand traps that is just generically -1. You lose card advantage by activating the card, and unless this will guaranteed end the opponent's turn, I think this card is just straight up just bad. Even when you're hitting something important like the Requiem in their deck, like they're still able to play through the board a little bit more, and then you just lose a card for free.
Yeah, I think the general rule of thumb for me on cherries is this card is only really viable in a meta where some sort of FTK deck is the best deck in the meta. I know I'm thinking back to like 2018, like Pendulum FTK. This card was viable then. We haven't really seen that outside of Gimmick Puppet, and Gimmick Puppet was hit on the ban list, so it wasn't that good to begin with. I think cherries will remain in F tier for the foreseeable future.
Gotcha. Now we have Imperm. I would automatically put Imperm like as the best hand trap ever. Besides Shifter, because Shifter's kind of a floodgate, I think Imperm being the best, it's effective Veiler that can be used as a top deck. It also doesn't play into Talents or Thrust. Absolutely insane card.
Yeah, no problems with that. This card is the second best hand trap in Yu-Gi-Oh.
Mole Charmy. I like this card a lot right now. I know it's going to see a little bit of like overshadowing once the new card Fuwaros comes out. But right now, I still think this card is absolutely super powerful. Parelia applies like a sort of floodgate restriction to your opponent while also replacing itself at a minimum, I'd say. And then it forces your opponent to end on a smaller board if they give you one draw. If they give you multiple draws, you basically just activated Desires on your opponent's turn.
Yeah, I think for the next 5 or 6 weeks before Rhoda comes out, this is going to be a high A tier card, but it's going to be more limited to your side deck. There's a few decks that can main deck this card, but I think that's pretty much included with only Tempai. But I think high A tier is a very good spot for this since it's mostly going to be a side deck option.
That's fair. I think it's definitely high tier, maybe even S tier. Even if it is in the side deck, the card is just mandatory in all side decks at this point, I think.
Absolutely.
Effect Veiler. I think this card will see a lot less play next format. We're not going to be Veilering Snake Ash. We're not going to be pairing Veiler with Nibiru to out Napaloosa to end their turn. So I think Veiler just becomes a lot less powerful, and I think we're going to lean more towards cards that have the potential to either end a turn on the spot, like Ash Blossom, Imperm, or like Bestials in general, Nibiru, or we're just not going to be playing hand traps.
So, this might be the first one we kind of disagree on. I think that Veiler has actually gotten better against the U-Bell deck because they're going to be more reliant on Dark Beckoning Beast. And I already felt that last format, Veilering Dark Beckoning Beast and Imperming Beckoning Beast was like a must-do thing. If that card gets summoned, you're hitting that card with effect negation. And I think now that the deck has lost a few more starters, I think the opportunity to end their turn is higher than before. And I also think the opportunity to end a Snake Eyes player's turn with one effect Veiler is higher than it was last format. So I would still rank Veiler around the same I would last format. I would put it right around Nib. I think when you're building your deck, if you have a lower hand trap count, you're going to have to choose between playing Veiler or Nib. And if you have a higher hand trap count, I don't think Veiler is the one that you exclude from your deck, in my opinion.
Gotcha. Okay, I see. I mean, let's go for like a middle ground and put it like a low A. I think that's a good middle ground for it.
Sure.
And the card definitely has its purpose in the format. I'm not saying it's bad in any means. I think it's just slightly worse than it was last format.
Okay.
Moving on, we have Droll. I think this card has a lot of mixed opinions about it. Droll is kind of similar to Cherries, to where when you activate the card, you're almost guaranteed losing one card in the activation of it, because you're going to 4 cards in hand and you're not taking anything away from your opponent. However, it does guarantee that their board will be smaller in most instances. I think the only thing to be careful of is that Yubel can end on the same board, like even with just a 1-card combo like Lotus, as you guys saw in my last video. If you droll them when they have Lotus, they end on the full board. It doesn't really change anything at all, so you just lost a card for fun. So I don't know. I don't know how I really feel about Droll. How are you feeling about it?
For me, Droll is a card where if you're playing at your locals or your regionals early in a banlist season, I honestly feel like Droll is probably going to help you at that level. People are going to be playing bad decks. They're going to have cards like Chicken Game, Upstart Goblin in their deck to make their deck more consistent with the hits. I think at that sort of level early in the format, I think Droll is actually good to main deck if you want to try to win your regionals. But I think as you move later in the format, people optimize their deck. You play against better players. This card will probably fall into low B tier, maybe mid B tier.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's definitely going to change throughout the format. It's definitely going to be a better earlier end to it. And then as you progress it, I think it'll get worse. Dogwood. I think this card, even though I love this card, is absolutely terrible. It doesn't do anything. The only time that this card actually has effectiveness is when you are playing into time. Sometimes it's uncontrollable. Sometimes you can control the pace of the game. Sometimes you can use the card to guarantee you get another turn, so you don't have to use as many resources. That's really the point of the card, in my opinion, is to dogwood your opponent. That way you guarantee get another turn. It lets you build up your resources, and then you can have a good attempt at cracking the board. But right now, with how the game is, I just don't think this card is going to be as good, especially when there's not as much time scamming going around since Lacrimosa's ban.
I agree with everything you said. I think it should go in C tier because I think the card actually does have some sort of use in the meta where I think the cards in back in the binder have basically no use. If somebody had Dogwood in their side deck, I wouldn't think that it's super crazy. But the other 4 cards I think have almost no use.
No, actually, I completely agree with that. I probably just put it in the wrong spot. CT seems a little better for Dogwood. Lancia. This card can go back in the binder. I don't think there's much of an argument to play this card right now.
Yeah, the only thing I've seen with this is against the U-Bell deck, it does turn off Yama, it does turn off Squirmer, but I just don't think that's enough of an impact with this card. They get too late into their combo and they make a huge board through it.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. You're still ending on Caesar, maybe not the Varudras because you don't have the Yama, but like Caesar, Rage, the Escape if that's what you're playing, and the Phantom as an inboard, and like you have one less card in hand, so I'm pretty sure you're cooked.
Yeah, this card is bad.
Okay. Mourner. Mourner is like a bad Veiler in my opinion. I would just instantly stick it down a little bit worse than Droll. Crow even might be better than Mourner. My thought is that Mourner just it's a bad Veiler. It's a Veiler that has restrictions on it.
To be honest, I would actually put Veiler in the category of where Bell is. I
Really?
think this
Okay.
card is. I think it's better than Bell, and I think it's better than Delta. But I would be playing Droll and DD Crow over this card immediately, and I don't think it's super close.
Okay. Yeah, that's fair. I'll definitely take that. Now for Ghost Ogre. This one's a little controversial, but I think Ghost Ogre is pushing like very high A tier, maybe even S tier, just because of the ability to top deck it into basically every board right now and still have an impact with it. Obviously, you can't Ghost Ogre the Appaloosa anymore, but against the like Runic decks, you can Ogre their field spell when going second. You can Ogre their boss monsters. You can Ogre a lot of different things, and that's going to have an impact on the board. Not to mention this card is a high impact hand trap versus U-Bell. So, I mean, let's take it an A tier. Like high A tier.
I agree. Ogre is a card that's grown on me, and it's grown on a lot of players in the last several months. Having the ability to open 2 of this card and have both of them be live, breaking boards, I think this card is very, very powerful. And it's also good to pair with a lot of hand traps, especially like last format, you could pair it with Nib. This format might be a little bit different since Appo's out of the meta, but we'll see how that unfolds.
Okay. And then here we have the last card of the video, Phantasme. I think that Phantasme served basically the same purpose as Shummy last format, letting you draw into multiple hand traps, rearrange your hand, so you could perfect 5-card combo your opponent. I felt like that was one of the only ways that you ended up winning the game when you were going second. However, in this format, I think that it's going to be a little bit easier to break board and even play board breakers as your main form of interruptions. So I think people will be playing Talents and Thrust more in their deck. I think it's a little bit risky to play Phantasme, but I'd still put it in like a high B tier. I don't know if I'd put it any higher than that though.
So I think I would put this card probably behind Baldrake, because Baldrake's a card I would definitely consider in my main deck, and Phantasme is a card that you absolutely cannot main deck, and to me it's not a staple side deck. When you're building your side, you're immediately putting 3 Chummies in, and that's taking up a lot of space in your side, and the Phantasmes to me are more copies of Chummy. I think they're, for the most part, strictly worse than Chummy, so I think middle B tier is a good category for this card. If you're looking for more copies of Chummy, this is what you go to.
Gotcha. Okay. Sounds good. Well, that wraps up the video, guys. If you did want to make your own tier list, you can check it out in the description down below. I put the link down there. If you want to send it to me on Twitter, I'll definitely go over it. I think it'd be great to hear your guys' opinions. Besides that, I wanted to thank you guys for watching the video. I wanted to ask you guys if you would like, comment, and subscribe. And once again, go check out Logan Johnson. He will be in the description down below as well, and we'll have a video coming out there soon. Thank you. Have a good one. Bye-bye.